There you go. Today is May 28th. This is SED community meeting. So we are gonna follow our agenda on SED meeting doc. The first thing that I'm gonna mention is I just want to remind you guys that SED version 3.4.8 and 3.3.21 has a crashing bug. There are the details in the link that you can look into, but please, you can use either 3.3.20, 3.4.7, or 3.3.22, 3.4.9. Another update is that currently in open source Kubernetes, we're using 3.4.7 for 1.19 Kubernetes version, and we are going to update that to 3.4.9 as well. Okay. Next item, I think it's from the Kubernetes long-term support working group. Josh, is that your item?
I thought it was Tim. Tim, did you make it? Tim Pepper?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep. I turn on video too. Sorry. So I'm guessing that's also why Josh is here. But yeah, we kind of brought this up in the Slack channel, the Kubernetes Slack channel for the working group yesterday, because it had come up over the weekend from the Kubernetes scalability SIGs lead, Wojtek. So general background, the so-called long-term support working group, we're looking at what is a proper length of support. LTS is a phrase people obviously are used to seeing that in other projects and maybe have a certain thing in mind, but we're just trying to openly ask the question, and it's been almost 2 years now, what should we be doing as a project? And that ultimately gets off into dependencies and dependency management and making sure that things are aligned. And we've mostly talked about Golang and Go dependencies, but Wojtek had a concern about etcd, and he'd noticed, and then I'd also gone and looked in the repos, there isn't like a clear roadmap or way for us to read and see and understand, like, do we have a major risk? So just trying to generally, and I'm not looking for like formal roadmap, like, or trying to say like, etcd, we need you to say on this day we're going to release and we're going to give this many days or months of support or anything like that. Just like, even at this point, just totally anecdotal to kind of have a sense of how you all are operating as a project. Like, is it a release every year or two or what, and how long do the patch releases tend to get support? It looks like right now it's 2, but it had been 3 getting support for as much as maybe a couple years. So just kind of curious to feel that out a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a great question to ask. So yeah, during 3.3, we were supporting 3 prior versions or 3 branches, and then we upgraded to 3.4, and we've been supporting 2 actively. It was 3.3 was the latest version for a very long time, like well over a year. I'd have to actually go back. It was the major version for so long. I'd have to go back and look and see how long it was, but. And we expect 3.4 to be a fairly long version as well, but there is some work going on for some new features, so there will be a 3.5 eventually. But the one thing I will say for sure is that many of the people that work on etcd and a huge amount of etcd usage is Kubernetes, right? So I think it makes sense and it's really practical to make sure that we're aligned.
So yeah, so speaking of the roadmap, like it's not like up to date, but we do have a planned breaking changes, and then all the changes listed in the change log. So if you look at the change log 3.5, like we have like all the list of changes like already made or like planned to be made in there. So maybe we can write a more higher level doc for the a roadmap, like based on the change log.
That maybe brings up a question from a Symver perspective. It looks like you're doing similar to Kubernetes, the major minor patch, but the minor isn't quite Symver because the minor is including breaking changes.
Have we ever included the breaking change?
So it's kind of like internal, like a break. So we don't break any APIs, but we do deprecate some like a logging like options. So for instance, we used to use the Captain's log as a logging, but we are migrating off to like a structured logging. So, but we do not break any like APIs between minor
External
versions.
APIs
Yeah.
wouldn't break. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's pretty close. You could point it. You could probably find a couple of things that aren't quite matching the most rigorous view of that, but pretty
Okay.
close.
That's good to hear. And then obviously, like from a Kubernetes perspective, because the projects are so close, we're gonna together see if there's issues. And I mean, historically, things have been resolved pretty much in lockstep. I feel like as something gets observed as a new version gets rolled into testing. The one thing that I could imagine, oh, and I didn't formally say, so right now we have a KEP that lazy consensus as of Friday last week has in merging towards an implementable state that would mean that Kubernetes 1.19 and forward get a year of support for patches instead of just the prior 9 months. There's still some ongoing discussion as to whether that might happen for the prior releases 1.18, 17, and 16. But then what that would mean is for some of these dependencies, if the sort of the release cadences are notably out of sync for a Kubernetes major release like 119, maybe midway through its year, we might try to move it to the then newest Golang and the then newest etcd, just to ensure that we have support from them for the remainder of the lifetime of that Kubernetes release. But as long as there's not breaking changes and it's just a minor release, 3.3 to 3.4, things like that, this should be viable, and especially with reasonable test CI coverage for that.
Also, yeah, can you share more about the like Golang dependency? Because right now we are still stuck in the 1.12 for the release patch.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that's bitten us every now and then, going back quite a ways to when I first got involved with the project. But even before I worked on Kubernetes, it was something that I regularly saw in a different orchestrator that I was working on. We'd always be testing on current, we'd have in our CI the two current Golang releases and master at head, because it would be a canary to sort of tell us that things were changing and breaking, and we needed to go learn what was new in Go. I feel like in general, Go is much more stable than it was, say, 5 years ago, when that was like, I was always watching what was changing in Go, literally day to day. But the 1.12 to 1.13 change was obviously a major one, and that's then one of the complexities with Kubernetes. Last year's 1.16 release in the fall being the first that got over to 1.13, and with everything then that we're supporting right now being on 1.13, it's easier. But Golang supports releases twice a year, February and August generally, and they support 2 releases at a time. So from a Kubernetes perspective, if we're trying to give a year of support in our releases, we're almost guaranteed to be out of support if we keep the same Golang that was around when we were developing a release, because it takes 3 months for us to put out a release, give or take, and then we'd support it for 9 to 12 months. You get 12 to 15 months of active development plus support, and that's obviously more than the 12 that you get from Golang. So this has kind of been a treadmill that we've already been on, but we're trying to figure out how to rationalize it. Some of our folks have also had discussion with Golang community folks who are maybe starting to think about the idea of increasing their support lifetime as well. I think they hear it from various of their users that it's hard to keep up with the change. And I can drop a couple of links in the notes there as well.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, speaking of the LTS support in Kubernetes, so like what would be helpful? Like, is it you guys just need a clear roadmap or like a support plan? Or
I think even just the affirmation that you are doing Semver, that like a 3.3 to 3.4 change should be fine, 3.3 to 3.4 to 3.5, things like that, those that we should be able to confidently expect that we could change those mid-cycle in our support lifetime and not feel like there is a major risk in doing so. But obviously not just shove it in and think it's going to work, but deliberately test ahead of that. And then to kind of have a sense, like if there was a 4.0 coming, or if it's just minor releases for the foreseeable future, I think that puts us in a place where we have very little risk and moving forward generally and keeping up with etcd.
Certainly, we don't have a 4.0 planned. I'm not aware of anything on the roadmaps, and you can tell me if you disagree, but I haven't seen anything that would suggest that we're going to need to go to a 4.0.
Yeah, he's right. Yeah, Joe is right.
So I think backwards compatibility is very much a goal. I think we're trying to improve the processes by which we do that. There's some internal things we have to do, like sometimes you have to introduce like a raft entry type one release before we actually start using it and things to be super safe. But I think we're getting better at that kind of stuff. So yeah, that should be for the foreseeable future. And I think that's the big one. Yeah, the APIs definitely, backwards compatibility is something that we're striving to do. Maybe I'm trying to think if there's any gaps in our testing that I'm concerned about there. We might be able to do better SKU testing at some point. That's the main one that comes to mind. And I think the last one is like kind of, are we, others can certainly weigh in here. It feels to me that we should definitely like make it a goal to be aligned. So we should basically be, maybe the simplest way to do it for starters would be we maintain these two minor revisions, and when we introduce 3.5, we'll actually just check with the Kubernetes community, because we don't do this that often, and just make sure that we're not going to drop something that's needed for support. I think that might actually be sufficient to start with, just like do a pulse check before we drop support for something and make sure it's okay first.
Yeah, even just as you start getting towards that, if you touch base with the SIG testing, SIG test infrastructure, just to start a conversation, that'll, I think, light a fire under us to go double check and see, and maybe start some PRs tentatively and test and see what we see.
Okay. Any concerns from any of the other maintainers? Anybody else?
Sounds good. Thanks, team.
Great.
Yeah, I appreciate the info. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
All right, things like the next item is PR 11929. I'm not sure who added that.
Hey, actually, that was me. I'm Daniel Mai from DGraph Labs. We had one of our users open this PR to address an out-of-memory issue, specifically with RAP. Just wanted to make sure that it was on your folks' radar. And you guys can take a look and just let us know if this is the right solution, or maybe if we're doing something wrong and something we can change on our side.
Yeah, we'll take a look at those. Like, could you share like how much is the like workload for the DGraph? Like, do you guys do a lot of writes? Like, how did the OOM happen?
Yeah, so in this case, the user said they were doing a lot of writes for sure. They have a lot of data in their installation. I think I shared a link in the latest comment in the PR with a e-profile analysis that should shed more light as well. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of writes going in.
I can just share a little bit of context. So yeah, he's basically writing a lot of stuff, and then when the cluster crashes, it tries to read the log. And we had dealt with this internal in DGraph. When we try to read the log and it's very long, it will try to read all of it into like an array. So it just allocates a lot of memory, and it runs out of memory just because you have to keep resizing the array, I guess. So we had done something in DGraph where we batch the writes. So we're not trying to read the whole huge thing at once. We just batch the writes of the log. And I guess he saw this and he kind of like adopted it to a place inside etcd that does a similar thing.
So you mean batch the write to the write ahead log, or to the
reads? I guess the reads, batch the reads. Sorry.
Okay, we will take a look. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kyo.
There is a question on the chat channel about which version of etcd should be used for Kubernetes 1.18. The best way to check is to go to the tag of Kubernetes and look at the SCD image makefile, it usually have SCD version there. If I'm not wrong, it should be 3.4, but which patch version I don't remember for Kubernetes 1.18.
So Wenja, so upstream Kubernetes test the client or also the SCD server?
Yeah, I am talking about the HCD server.
Okay, I think once you have those Makefile, they also use that image to test
Yeah.
as a local server. So yeah, that's the Makefile is the one you are looking for.
Yeah, let me just send a link to the chat. Right?
Yes, I mean I am not using the Makefile. I'm using basically HCD executable module.
Yeah, but that's the recommended because that's the version that the open source Kubernetes use of SCD. So that would be some reference for you to look at.
Okay. Okay, let me go through it because I have already used the high availability of HCD with the 3 masters. So I just want to reconfirm it whether I can go ahead with the stable version which I can use it in production.
Yeah, you still want to in the makefile it's 3.4.3, but you still want to test it before, just make sure it works for you. I mean, if it works for other people, nobody complain. Doesn't mean it would always work for you. Have it tested before.
Okay, I will go ahead and
Yeah.
let you know if we have any concerns. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, from the other attendees in the meeting, is there anything else that's not covered in the agenda? Going once, going twice. All right, I guess that's it for today's meeting. We'll see you guys in 4 weeks. All right,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.